Only because we have such a long piece of text to read. That's all one piece. Do I want to start even 2 minutes early? Like, I don't know if Harry's online, but I don't even see Harry who walks in fashionably late, the fashion plate that he is. But it's wonderful to have everybody. We have like places far afield represented online. I can see it. New York City, Paris, Chappaqua, could even be the Berkshires, which is all wonderful. So people tuning in as well. We got a minion there, and a full table, which is great. We have great Torah to study. Share with me in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. We have not studied this section for like 18 years. So that's pretty cool that it's been that long. You know what? We're gonna get more chairs. I don't need to say, you know what? Carol, do me a favor. Just go tell Gennaro that if he just radios Marvin to fly in, give him more chairs. Be great. So why this? Remember why do we seldom study this section? In part because there's so much else in the Torah portion that's engaging and enticing, like getting out of Egypt, like what happens at the shores of the sea when Moses says, "Watch the miracle that Adonai will work for you today." And what is God's response? Ma titzak elai. What are you fetching to me for? Tell Israel to move, to go forward. So there's great stuff, and then of course Egyptians drowning. Israel's response, the song of the sea, right? All this stuff happening. But now this is post-sea, and it's the kvetching. It's the beginning of kvetching, and the kvetching that continues. If anybody needs a handout, by the way, I have extra handouts. They are $4,000. No, it's all free. It's all free. So this is a moment, and our focus is really not the kvetching, though it's part of it. This is after the first kvetching that happens at the waters of Marah. My friend Rabbi Nathan hated when I studied Marah because that's her name and it means bitterness. And she is anything but bitter. She is delightful and a joy. But we get chapter 16, a long chapter. We're going to read the whole chapter because you have to get the feel of what's going on in the text. And excuse me, there's a lesson beyond the obvious, because the obvious lesson is, oh yeah, manna from heaven. Yeah, we got it. Fine. Thanks. Next. There's a lot being played out here that connects us, I think, today to our own life journeys and to the spiritual sustenance that we might need and that God may be providing. So we're going to read the text. I'm going right around. I'm starting with Deb, and I'm going right around. If you want to read, say pass. But I'll stop you as we go. This is chapter 16.
Setting out from Elim, the whole Israelite community came to the wilderness of Sin.
Yeah, that is not like sin, like, did something wrong. That is sin. Got it.
Which is between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after the departure from their land of Egypt. In the wilderness, the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, when we ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to starve this whole congregation to death." And the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread for you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather each day that day's portion, that I may thus test them to see whether they will follow my instruction or not. But on the sixth day, when they apportion what they have brought in, it shall prove to be double the amount they gather each day." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "By evening you shall know it was the Lord who brought you out from the land of Egypt."
All right, stop for a second. So we're getting hints here as to what's going on, and the motivation for this, as you can see in the text. And we're getting descriptions of what this is. This is lechem min hashamayim, bread from the heavens. Okay, and it seems to be in response to Israel's pressure, which they do very well. I always am reminded that my classmate, Jordan Goldson, who I knew way before he was a rabbinic intern here, Jordan Goldson was like 6'4". He actually had a tryout with what team? Kansas City Royals, some team, I forget. He was a pitcher, he was great. But Jordan's thesis was B'nai Kvetch. The 13 episodes of the kvetchings of the people of Israel in the wilderness. 13 episodes, okay? This may be the most productive. And we also get that key sentence, V'yadatem ki Adonai, right? What's the goal here? What's one of the primary reasons? It is that you shall know I am Adonai, right? That's gonna come back to us. All right, Mike's gonna go. I know it's the middle of a sentence, but it's a good break in the Hebrew.
Yeah, and in the morning you shall behold the presence of the Lord, because he has heard your grumblings against the Lord. But who are we that you should grumble against us? Since it is the Lord, Moses continued, who will give you flesh to eat in the evening and bread in the morning to the full? Because the Lord has heard the grumblings you utter against them. What is our part? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord.
Yeah, so that's Moses and Aaron talking to the people and saying, you're not questioning against, it's not us, it's God. You want to do this? Okay, all right, fine. But hold on a second, hold your question 1 second, then we'll get, okay. Keep going, Mike.
Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole Israelite community, advance toward the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as Aaron spoke to the whole Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud appeared the presence of the Lord. The Lord spoke to Moses, I have heard the grumblings of the Israelites. Speak to them and say, by evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread, and you shall know that I, the Lord, am your God. In the evening, quail appeared and covered the camp. In the morning, there was a fall of dew about the camp. When the fall of dew lifted, there over the surface of the wilderness lay a fine and flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, what is it? But they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, that is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you requires to eat, an omer to a person, for as many of you as there are, each of you shall fetch for those in his tent.
All right, so you got instruction, right, directly to the people, or to Moses, and then through Moses to the people. And now we have what the Israelites did. So go ahead, Wayne.
From that 17?
Yeah, the Israelites did so,
The
yeah.
Israelites did so, some gathering much, some little. But when they measured it by the,
Omer, which is a finite, right, remember, right, like log omer or an omer, right? So this is a finite amount.
he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no deficiency. They had gathered as much as they needed to eat. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over until morning. But they paid no attention to Moses. Some of them left of it until morning, and it became infested with maggots and stank. And Moses was angry with them. So they gathered it every morning, each as much as was needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it would melt.
All right, a little more.
On the 6th day, they gathered double the amount for food, 2 omers for each. And when all the chieftains of the community came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Sabbath of the Lord. Bake what you would bake and boil, what you would boil, and all that is left put aside to be kept until morning. And they put it aside until morning as Moses had ordered, and did not turn foul, and they were no maggots in it. Then Moses said, eat it today, for today it is a Sabbath of the Lord. You will not find it today on the plain. 6 days shall you, 6 days shall
No,
you,
6 days.
6 days shall you gather it. On the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be none.
Right, so again, integration of Shabbat, right, and manna, you know, which is all of one piece really. Though manna is the striking characteristic of a miracle. And then we get the extension of that. Raj, go ahead.
Yet some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found nothing. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you men refuse to obey my commandments and my teachings? Mark that the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you 2 days food on the 6th day. Let everyone remain where he is. Let no one leave his place on the 7th day. So the people remained inactive on the 7th day. The house of Israel named it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and it tasted like wafers in honey. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Let 1 omer of it be kept throughout the ages in order that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out from the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, put 1 omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout the ages, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Aaron placed it before the pack to be kept, and the Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a settled land. And they ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan.
Okay, so there's a lot of text, a lot of stuff, but it's one piece, it's one story. What is jumping off the page of you on a shot level from the text? Okay, guys.
So God just had 10 plagues, got the Jews freed, they got through the Red Sea. And then 6 days later, they're complaining, I don't believe God's taking care of it.
What have you done for me lately? Right? It's unbelievable. It really is. It really is. And these are not little things, right? These are big deal things. But they're in the wilderness and the sea alone, right, should be enough. But still.
Well, God is testing them, and that is interesting because God is wanting a relationship with them. He's wanting to see how far they'll go, to have a connection.
Right, so Susan-
At a different level.
Susan's underscoring something really important. So it says, right, and it's part of the Koshi. So what is the test of manna? What, this is a test? What's the test? And what is the miracle of manna? And what is it teaching us, of course, about covenant and about God and about us, right? Rise and win.
So, Rabbi, I just have a question. In verse 2,
Yeah.
there are parentheses. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we're in the parentheses. Let me see.
So there's Olay or
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it's just because, in the Torah, it's written, with the wrong letter. Or with a letter that could make it mean something else.
but what does that mean? The word?
It mean, it means complaint.
Oh, complaint. Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna come back again and again in this chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, and they complain. Yeah, wait.
It seems as though whenever Israel gets in an impossible situation that God always provides for what they need.
So one of the miracles we see is God's provider, right? This is like, oh, wow. Right, so this is so God is the provider, right? When Israel's in the tough spot.
I never thought about it before until we read it now, but how they emphasize the importance of Shabbat, that even God observes Shabbat, because he doesn't work, but he doesn't provide food those days.
Right, even God needs a day off. I think that's the title of my new book. Right, I love that. Yeah, so Shabbat is integrated into the manna
Yeah.
somehow in a meaningful way.
So it's saying he's testing them to see if they'll follow the instruction, and the instruction is, the word Torah is used as the instruction.
Right, my Torah, right?
And they're really not following the instruction like he's asking them to know God by following the instruction and by finding the manna, and your question teaching about covenant, like there's always some rebelliousness.
Always some rebelliousness. Is this a test? of the people, will they follow God's instruction? Is this sort of like boot camp? Right? In a way it is, right?
There's a degree of uncertainty here that's a little bit troubling, in that it makes people think that God will always provide, and that to be grateful when you've done nothing other than recognize that God is there for you. What does that leave you in terms of your ability to activate yourself, to go forward?
Right, so in one sense, the secondary question becomes, right, so if this is a test, is this a test in trusting God will always provide? And what happens, like, what is your part in that?
Exactly.
Right, what's your part in that? I think there's a big part, by the way,
Mm.
right, big part. Harley, then Carol, and then Tom.
So on shot level for me, it's like, it strikes me as a fantasy. It's something to dream, it's an image. Like, I don't even know what mana is. And I think it's like, take a portion of something that's indecipherable, take a portion of something that's unclear what the definitions are, and put this thing, which is so difficult and ephemeral, in it. It's a great tool to have a conversation of. I have no idea what mana is.
Yeah, so on a shot level, it's a great sort of, right, recognition, which Harley is saying, so what's the test? You want us to trust in this thing that we don't even know what it is, right? It's right. Everett Fox translates it in the Buber Rosenweis translation in a parentheses after what is it is whatchamacallit. So God is giving them whatchamacallit, right? It's like, oh, that's great, right? Sure.
So I actually think they are setting up the relationship right even in this story. God doesn't anticipate their needs and preemptively offer them. The Israelites grumble, but they have to recognize their own needs and express it. And then God responds. So it's not all one-sided.
So it's reciprocal, and it's initiated by Israel's crying out. So there's some, right? And God responds, and then there's another response, and so it's a back and forth. Tom.
So I was wondering if there's trust or faith is in the text at all, because it sounds like there is a test of trust or faith.
For sure, a test of trust or faith. There's something else going on, right? I got Ellen online, Michael online, and then Zev, and then Mike.
Hi, I was very fascinated by the fact that people, after they were told that they could take what was there, they continued to look for more. And when they did, what they found turned to rot, maggots and so on.
Yes.
And I think that's so interesting, because for us, we can think that what is given to us should be sufficient. And we don't need to take more and grab more and take more from others. But in fact, we can be satisfied with what is allotted to us. And this beautiful passage about the manna, I think, is teaching us to trust that there will be enough for everyone.
Yes.
We just take what is right for us.
So is it a test of understanding what you need, right? Is that part of the test, right? Michael Feinberg.
So I'm intrigued by the fact that God has heard your grumblings against the Lord. Now, for 400 years, either we believe that the Israelites just didn't complain, which is impossible to believe. After all, they were Jews, even if they had forgotten they were Jews, or somehow they are now in a dynamic relationship with God, so that this transition is now they're complaining against him. Before, maybe they were complaining, but it was undirected complaining. It's something radical occur in their relationship to what is not them.
Beautiful. So this is teaching us a new level of relationship, of knowing, of intimacy. God got hearing aids after all, right? So that's a big deal. I think it was Zebby next. I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
Okay.
Zebby and Mike, maybe something, I'm forgetting something. Zebby.
What struck me is something about Moses' character. I think it does state where it says, "He is our path that is in and out." What does it have to do with us? Your grumbling is not against us.
Right.
It's against the Lord. He's not really saying they shouldn't grumble against the Lord. He's just worried about just leave us out of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Nothing to do with this. Blame to the Lord. Interesting.
yeah, and it's said actually in a familiar way. It doesn't say ve'anachnu, it's v'nachnu ma, lo aleinu.
Yeah.
Right, it's almost like saying, hey, listen, guys, it's not us. What are you pointing the finger at us for? Right, so that's part of a relationship, right, of coming to know God.
I was just gonna raise the question, I mean, what kind of a God requires people to constantly pass these tests? I mean, there's just something so self-centered about that.
It's almost petty.
Yeah, that's a good way. of putting it.
Right, yeah, what kind of God is this? Right, we have to pass a test? Really, this is what God's about? Is this AP history? I mean, seriously, Michael.
So, right afterwards, that was reading from, it said, Moses said to Aaron, say the whole Israelite community advance toward the Lord, for he has heard you grumbling. I'm sorry. And then they turned toward the next one. They turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud appeared the presence of the Lord. But how could they see the presence of the Lord? Because you're not supposed to see the Lord.
Well, they saw a cloud. Right, they saw a cloud and they said, huh, right? So I would say to you that on a shot level, there's something about seeing that is believing, right? Right, is that what is that? Idaho, Iowa, show me state? What is the show me state? Right, give it to Missouri. I knew that. What are you kidding? I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Another word for complaining is whining.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Oh, they're fetching.
Whining to a parent, and that's when you kind of lose it with your kids. You're like,
Yes, but here's the interesting thing. Did God lose it with the kids? No, God did not lose it with the kids, right? I got Ellis, then I'm gonna go to the Remy, sorry.
You got one here.
No, I know, I got a million, I got 4 people, I'm cutting them off. How do you like that? I have the power. Ellis.
I was gonna ask to kind of piggyback on what Michael said, Feinberg.
Yeah.
When the Jews are in Egypt, are they Jews? Are they Israelites at that moment? Or are they beginning to becoming that?
Yeah, well, there are no Jews, by the way, Ellis, good point, right? So sociologically, societally, there are no Jews. Could they be Israelites? Well, they're descendants from Joseph and Jacob's sons and children who came down, 70 in number. But part of knowing Adonai is knowing who they are. So this is a process of understanding and coming to know who they are. The only reason I'm cutting off commentary in all sincerity is because we have so much and I don't want to miss it because it's a great drash sod. So we get to the remez. So we're in the remez and we want to see what the rabbis make of this. And the rabbis and commentaries are struggling to try to understand what is the test, what is the miracle, and how does that so matter for us? Okay? Elaine is going to give us the Rashi and then the Nechama.
So that I may test them to see if it can keep the commandment and hinge upon it, that they should not leave any over from it, nor go out to collect it on Shabbat.
Right, so Rashi is directly quoting the Talmud, right? And it's a Talmudic discussion that goes on, and they're trying to figure out what is the test? Is it a test? And so that sort of ensues, right? And Rashi gives us the natural, of course, that's what the test is. I'm gonna get Harry in a minute, but first just give me the Nechama who says.
Surely putting man to the test implied challenging him. But what challenge did the manna constitute? Rashi's solution is force. The Peshat indicates that the giving itself was somehow Israel's trial.
So the fact that they got the manna was the trial, says Nechama. We're gonna unpack what that means in a minute. Harry.
It's just a question. So the Hebrew for test, I was trying to find it.
Yeah.
Is the same as test for Abraham.
Let's see. I'm not saying I'm almost positive it is, by the way.
Well, it's Esau for Abraham, but I can't, there's a different form in this.
If only we had died, and the Lord said, so it's, unascended.
Right.
Yeah, same root, yeah.
Just a comment.
Yeah, this is a test.
Right, yeah.
It's a test, not of the emergency broadcast system, okay? Steve,
So I think this is a setup.
it's a setup.
It's a setup. Because people come out of Egypt. God would be like, we gotta feed these guys. But instead, he makes them ask for it. In other words, he's setting them up to create Shabbat, to get them to understand that there's time, that everything is, that this is not for nothing. This is, you gotta work for it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna note, because Harley started with a pre-question 25 minutes ago, and talked about, we should do it, time is very interesting. Remember, we did time last week in the beginning of months and marking time, and how we mark the beginning of time, and how the real new year is getting out of Egypt. And so we mark time in that way. This is even a subcategory of marking time. Marking time is about understanding time is not your own. And that you live by a different calendar. And so what is the calendar of Israel? You want to be part of Israel? Every 7 days you rest. How am I going to help you understand that? Mana. Really? Mana. Yes. This is a miracle and a test all in one. So I'm gonna have, only because it's all, so Elaine, give us one more, because the Ramban now is gonna underscore, and by the way, everybody throws Rashi under the bus. Everybody, Rashi's the Cliff Notes to Torah, everybody throws him under the bus, go ahead.
Rashi is not correct. We must rather follow the implications of Deuteronomy 8:16. Who fed you manna in the wilderness, which your fathers knew not, in order to try you? For it was a trial for them not to have food of their own, and to have no alternative but the manna. They hungered for it, being totally dependent upon it. God could have led them through the cities, but deliberately put them to this test in the wilderness. For by this would Adonai know that they would always keep faith.
Right, so what's the test according to Ramban? Keeping faith. Knowing Adonai. There's something about knowing Adonai and the importance of establishing this relationship, which is the test. Trusting Adonai, right? Think about their level of trust previous to this. Who did they trust? Pharaoh? Really? And think about what that kind of relationship that was. Because Pharaoh was the god. He was despotically divine, right? Harley.
So in verse 4, as part of the test.
Yeah.
And I've not noticed this before, so we have so God, I'm gonna channel Rita.
Yeah.
That God is saying, I am here, and he uses the magic term hineni.
Yeah.
And so God is saying, as part of this test, I'm here, just like, everyone else, I'm here for you, just like you've been saying, you're here for each other.
Yes, and in fact, I don't know who said it. Did Carol say it? Who said that Israel had to respond, right? Right? So what was Moses' response to God?
Right.
Hineni.
Right.
What was God's response? What was God's response to the people? Hineni.
I'm here.
Hineni.
Right.
Code word.
Right.
I'm here to help.
In relationship with you.
In relationship. Beautiful.
So God's not that petty.
That is my third book, by the way. God's not that petty.
So, God's being kind of maternal in his giving them the manna, like nutritionally feeding them. It's, that's kind of nice, that.
Yeah.
And also, they're not knowing the manna in order for them to know God.
Yes, yeah, well, yes, right, mana is a pretext, right? Mana is a pathway, right? Maternal, right? When mommy feeds you, whether it's breastfeeds you or feeds you from a bottle, right? Mommy is the source of nutrition and nourishment. So not only do you know the bottle, but you know mommy, right? So that's beautiful.
This God teaching people who God is, seems like there's less of like a spiritual connection than you'll know me by my rules, follow my rules and you'll know me.
So the question becomes, how do we know God? And so is this follow God's rules, you'll know, Adonai. Or Zev.
It's kind of a setup. God just the phone and wood.
God just, yes,
Little Glenn came down.
yes.
That's a test.
Right, so I can't resist. So look at what Abravanel says, right? Who's reading? Simon.
What was the great trial by which God proved them when he provided them daily with bread to eat? On the contrary, far from being a trial, this act constitutes an extraordinary example of kindness. But in fact, is no true test.
Right, so Zevi's saying, Abravanel, saying, what's a miracle? What do you mean test? This is a miracle. I want you to recognize the miracle. That's a test.
Well, isn't the basis, within this Zion is Ness?
Harley stole my thunder, as always, because he understands, right? In the middle of test is the word miracle. Huh, can you beat that? Nes gadol hayasham. You hear nes? Nisa? It's the same word. Dave.
So to Lisa's point, I think that the cloud is supposed to be the Shekinah.
Cloud is the Shekinah. So it's the divine indwelling, right? And it's the maternal presence, right? How do they see God, right? It's the maternal presence of God's divine indwelling, right? Yeah.
So I think if Ravenel is saying, these people were tested, I've been tested. I've been thrown out of how many countries?
Right,
Every
right.
time I've been successful.
Right.
You know, this isn't a test, you're getting cost something.
Right, so, right. So Abravanel saying, this is not a test.
But he is conjuring. So why does Torah call it a test?
So, yep.
Telling Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, that's a test.
Right, so what does the Rashbam say? Rashi's grandson, after Rashi's thrown under the bus, the Rashi says, Simon, give us one more.
Every day for its portion, testing them for every day they will depend on me for sustenance.
Right, so the test is, can you trust me every day? Because it's Yom, right? What is it called? What's the Devar Yom B'Yomo, right? They'll take this, right? As each day is needed, that's what they'll take, day by day. So it's day by day. What did Jews say when they wake up in the morning, traditionally? They wake up and the first thing, before they put their feet in the ground, as Dr. Kravitz used to say Modeh Ani. Right, how grateful I am to you, God, for restoring my soul to me. That's the first thing you say. Every day is the trial, every day is the miracle. It's all bound up together. Jess.
Yeah, I just want to backtrack for a second.
Yeah.
I don't mean to question a gift from God. The language here kind of threw me for a loop. There's ambiguity in it. I'm gonna go back.
What a surprise.
And over the surface of the wilderness lay a fine and flaky substance like frost on the ground. Well, okay, I guess the individual or divinity that wrote this came from New England, because frost in the desert, I would think, would be rare because there's no moisture in the desert.
Yes.
Number two, fine and flaky. When I came across that took, I couldn't concentrate anymore because that's an ambiguity.
Right. Right. So what is this thing? Right? What is this thing? And as Jess is pointing out, go ahead.
I see flaky, and I don't mean to be anal about this, as vulnerable, because it's easily broken and not continuous.
I love that. I love the imagery. And I thought you were going where I thought you were going is New England, Frost, Robert Frost, right? So you are giving us a poetic substance to try to mold into something. That's what you're giving us? That's what this is? This is a miracle? It's gonna dissipate in our own hands, as Harley points out, right? Do we need this? Did we read the Mechilta? Mechilta is just a reinforcement, right? Right, it's worth reading. Harry, give us the Mechilta if you want.
But first, I have a different suggestion about what the test is. The test is going to end after 40 years, when you get to Canaan, the text tells us this is over. So the test, maybe the test is, you think it's, this looks good now, but it's not gonna go on.
Right, so the test is, can they have faith when their needs are not provided with?
They
Right?
don't know that, as Solomon points
Right,
out.
so,
The
right,
text
so,
tells us.
so is that right? Is this a setup for the long term, the long run?
What do you want me to read?
The Mechilta, The Mechilta just underscores the Rashba.
The amount required for each day's eating, they shall gather on that day. Devar yam v'yamah. That they will not gather today for the needs of tomorrow. How un-Jewish, I don't know. He who created day likewise created its sustenance. So Rabbi Eliezer taught, whoever has enough to eat today and asks, will I have also for tomorrow, is counted among those of little faith.
Right, so, this is, by the way, if you ask me, right, this is not, what's the test here? So what does a slave do? Say again? Doesn't know time, that's it, but if you give a slave bread, I should be more specific, what does a slave do?
Hoards it.
Hoards it, that's exactly it. You put away a little,
Yeah.
right, and you eat what you can need, or even not enough, but you put away 2 days worth. That's what a slave does. What is this? This is a not slave. This is a non-slave mentality. What's the test? Can you trust in the future? Because in Egypt, you could not trust.
Well, but it's just it's sort of pushing people towards irrationality. Because a rational person would be concerned about tomorrow and the.
Yes, yes. Do you think believing in God is rational? Are you kidding me? Look at the world, right? This is a non-rational being or a non-rational state of, right, faith. Is faith rational? Not always. Sometimes, maybe. Look, so we skipped to exactly what Jesse was saying, right? The fall of dew lifts, and there's a fine flaky substance, right? And it's described, right? The Hebrew is really great because you don't see the word again. Where is it? Verse 14. It is on the face of the water, it's like dew. Dak michus pas. What does that mean? I don't know. I've never seen the word before. I will never see it again. Right? It's dak. It's this fine substance. I don't even know what it is. Like a fine dust almost on the ground. Right? And what do the rabbis say? Look at the Ibn Ezra. Who's up? Dick.
I have one question, if you don't mind. We can't define mana, but in verse 34, Aaron is supposed to place it before the pact.
Yes, we are gonna, let us get there, because we're gonna get there, but you are reading the verse that's gonna help us define mana.
Okay, well, that's good, because we haven't gotten the tablets yet, so I have no idea what this pact is.
Right.
Good for you. There is no other example of makush pots in the Bible. The root is unclear. May the bones of Hiwi, the criminal, and all who lust after him be ground to dust, and those who say manna still falls in the desert. If manna was a naturally recurring phenomenon, why didn't it fall on Shabbat? The stuff that falls in the Sahara, and I have seen it myself, does not fall throughout the year. This assertion is shameless.
So clearly, there's a commentator named Hiwi, and I don't know who it is, that Ibn Ezra brings in, 11th century grammarian, and says, this guy's full of shit, right? What is going on here, right? And there clearly is something in the desert that falls that you could say, oh, that's manna. What is Ibn Ezra saying? This is a singular, never again occurring miracle. This is solely provided for Israel. Do not compare this to anything else.
This is very hard for me to buy this whole story. I'm a slave. Now I'm not a slave. Now you want me to trust on what I can't see, what I can't hear, that it's gonna be provided for me if I buy into this? Why should I believe you? What's the proof? How do I buy that? I can't as a rational person.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Arnie, by the way, will die in the wilderness. I'm gonna tell you that. Why? Why? Because he's the guy going out on Shabbos to gather double portion. Because he says, are you kidding me? This is, right? So Pharaoh was the despot who would withhold nourishment, who would give us less than we needed, right? God is the one who gives us enough, right? God is enough. But it's hard to trust, right? Zevi, then we're gonna get to the definition of manna there.
I just want to go to the spots.
Yeah, michus pas, go ahead.
There is a definition.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
It's like rigid, it's not smooth.
right.
It's a contradiction of terms.
Right, right, because every Hebrew root is 3 letters, usually. What is this root? Chuspas? Right, right? So watch what Everett Fox does, which I alluded to already, right? David, you still reading? Good, it's perfect.
Manhu. A folk etymological corruption of the Hebrew Manhu. What is it?
So they call it, what is it? Or as Everett Fox says, it's whatchamacallit. That's what they call it. So look at Rashbam. Rashbam is crucial. Go ahead.
It, the end of the phrase.
That should say, that should just say the end of the phrase.
The end of the phrase, they did not know what it was, confirms that man, what actually means who in Aramaic, Moses writing it in the language they actually spoke.
What is Rashbam saying, which is really, really brilliant? It doesn't mean whatchamacallit. What does it mean? Aramaic was the 1st, 2nd century language, a combination of Hebrew and other things that Israel spoke in ancient Israel. And Rashbam is saying, oh, it's not called whatchamacallit, it's called who is it?
That's Mahu.
That's Mahu.
What is this is Mazeh.
Right? So Mahu or Manhu in Aramaic would be who is it? If they're calling it who is it, what are they really calling it? God. They're calling it who sent this? Who gave us this? Wow. Manna.
Sorry, they spoke Aramaic in when, in 1100 BC, 1213, when?
Listen, as Dr. Kravitz would say.
It was the language of 1st century.
As Dr. Kravitz would say, first of all, Aramaic comes from some roots, some things are from ancient pre-Hebrew or exilic, pre-biblical Hebrew. But as Dr. Kravitz would always say, the Torah we know was written in Yiddish first. Right? Come on, it's Yiddish. So maybe there's another implication right here. And of course, as Ellen was hinting at, what's the miracle being affirmed here? The miracle being affirmed here is Steve Bartel, the Rashi.
There were those who took too much and those who took too little. But when they came home, they found that no one had more or less than an omar per head. This is the miracle.
What is the miracle? Something beyond human desire is making everybody equal.
So I want to add another in part of remez for mana.
Go ahead.
Because in modern Hebrew, mana means portion.
Yeah.
I have a chetzi mana.
Mana.
Shlema.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like I'll have a portion of this portion. It's like a Kleenex. It's a generic form of, do you have enough?
Right. So it could be, it's a portion.
Right.
Be satisfied with your lot.
It's not food, it's a portion.
It's a portion. I'm gonna go Ellis first, then Harry, then Ellen. Then Mike.
My question is that so their relationship to God at this point is coming through Moses. Moses is sort of interregnum, this conduit.
Yes.
And so when they get mad at Moses, they're just getting mad at God. It's Moses' job to convince them, look, you're not getting mad at me, you're getting mad at God.
Yes. Which is, of course, what happens throughout the wilderness journey, right? Moses is the intermediary. But part of the test you're implying, Ellis, is they got to realize Moses isn't the intermediary, that they have a relationship with Yud He Vav He, with the God of all being, the God of eternal presence, right? I have no idea who I called on after I called on. Who do you remember? Harry. Go ahead, Harry.
So the miracle is that some people took too little. That's the miracle.
Oh, the miracle is knowing Jews are Jews at the buffet table.
We don't have to even particularize it. Some people took too little. It was free and they took too little.
So
Crazy. But the other thing is, in our search for what manna means, I'm thinking people use this phrase all the time. It's like manna from heaven.
Yeah.
without knowing what mana is.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. And I think in a way, maybe we should approach the word in the text the same way. It's a word that nobody knows what it means exactly.
Yeah.
And yet we use it because of what it conveys around.
Yeah, and I want to underscore what Jesse's question was, because Jesse's question is so astute. He doesn't even know how brilliant his question was, right?
Yes, he does.
Look at him. He doesn't have a clue, right? No. And we'll come back to him. We'll come back to him. I went in order here. Ellen, Michael, Ellen. Yeah, Howard blocks Ellen. Ellen.
Okay, I just wanted to unmute. I wanted to go back to the point that somebody made. I don't remember who it was exactly because I can hardly see people on my computer, but about the irrationality of not providing for the next day, not providing for tomorrow and for the future.
Yes.
Because I think it's important. I think that I would take it very symbolically, this whole passage about manna, that you can trust, believe that there is enough for everyone. There will be enough for everyone. Or you can believe there's not enough for everyone, so I have to grab everything for myself and take as much as I can, because if I don't do that, there won't be enough for me. And I think the passage is teaching us that we can be laid back a little bit because we believe and we know there will be enough. If we just take only what's right for ourselves, then we will leave what's left. It's like gleaning at the end of the harvest.
Yeah, so
that's, I think,
part of the test, Ellen, is not having that slave mentality. It's trusting in tomorrow. Because as a slave, you can barely trust in today. Right, Mike?
Yeah, this may sound a bit glib, but I did want to sort of pick up on Jesse's very keen insight about the ambiguities and the contradictions, and then tie that to trying to translate the meaning of mana as in who is it, and if it's supposed to be God, well, then it would make sense that there are these contradictions, ambiguities, because God sort of encompasses it all, the good, the bad.
Yep, beautiful. Yeah, there is something, and Harry said it, right? And Harley said it. There is something intentionally ambiguous about mana. We are trusting in an ambiguous substance we can't fully grasp. Wow. The note in 22-23, which I gotta go with, is if you were gonna go, you would see at the bottom of that. You don't have to go to it. I'll just tell you. In verse 22, it calls mana. It says, so they gathered each morning. No, sorry, I'm reading the wrong verse. On the sixth day, gather a double portion. Double portion is called lechem mishnah. Lechem mishnah in rabbinic parlance comes to represent having two chalot on the table on Shabbat. Why? Because you got a double portion. There's more than enough for everybody. It's a 2 chalot day. It's Shabbos. Don't worry about a thing. Everything is here that you need. God too. Right? And now I'm going to continue. I'm not going to call on anybody. I'm sorry. But I got to get, because I don't want to miss this. So now the end of it, which Dave said, what? So they had a pact? They had an ark? They had what are you kidding me? So this is so anachronistic, because what does it say? It says in verse 32, okay, they call it manna, and then God commands, right? Moses says, we're going to put one portion in a jar, and we're going to put that jar before Adonai to be kept throughout the ages, and Aaron is going to place it before the pact, whatever that is, because we don't know what it is, because we haven't had it yet. And the Israelites will remember that they ate manna for 40 years until they came to the border of Canaan. So this is anachronistic, ironic, questionable. What do the rabbis think? Of course, Ibn Ezra says what we're all thinking, right? Steve, did you read? I don't know if you read yet. Did you read? Yep. So Tom, Dr. Tom, Ibn Ezra, you see it?
This passage should have been written after Mishkan's construction. but Torah wants to keep the miracles together. Well, there's one jar of manna listed throughout the ages. The miracle of manna was the greatest of all, and not a one-time event, but lasting 40 years, keeping Israel alive.
So he's implying something. He's implying that manna and the idea of manna is so central to Israel's survival in the wilderness, though it should have been written after we got the instructions in Parshat Teruma, in Exodus 25 to build the Holy Ark and all that. It doesn't matter, because manna is the overarching miracle that keeps us going in the wilderness, right, Susan?
So I'm seeing manna on a different level. I'm seeing it as something that's that God, it's part of God, that we are ingesting and aspects of God on multiple levels to help recreate ourselves.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. That, again, very so-like. Steve, Elaine, quick, then I'm gonna go to the draft.
So I also think it stops fighting amongst each other.
Stop us from fighting a bunch of you. Okay, okay.
Because everybody has just enough. Nobody's saying I took less, I should have taken more, and you got more than I did.
Okay.
And it's just a very unique way of bringing everybody together.
Yes.
It's an equalizer.
Yes, I love that. I love that. It's an equalizer, Elaine.
One could argue that the manna, the concept of manna is just a wonderful literary device, because it's so ambiguous, and because how could anyone eat it for 40 years? It must be that it's not only satisfied, but it had the flavor or whatever it was that made people feel satisfied, not bored. And one could also link it to Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. It will be whatever it needs to be for each
Beautiful.
person, and the name
Beautiful.
of God, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh.
Beautiful.
So,
Beautiful. I'm sorry, I gotta go, because I'm not gonna have time. You're gonna put everybody's hands down for the moment. Rashi says something sort of cool. In order that they may see the bread, I fed them in the wilderness. Moses brought the jar of manna and said, generation, behold the word of Adonai. That's what is referred to in Jeremiah when they're recounting the wilderness journey. Behold the word of Adonai, not hear the word of Adonai. Why? Because this was implying see the manna and remember. Manna is whatchamacallit, and who was it? Who is it? All at the same time. Now we get Shai held, and then, and I'm so sorry, you're gonna see the other commentary in a minute, is somebody who wrote an essay on manna and Shabbat last year after it was mentioned, Clarence, who couldn't be here today. But Clarence is part of our drush, which is very cool.
Does he know this?
He knows it. His dad took ill, so he's with his dad at hospital. I hope everything's well, poo. But I'm sure if he was here, he would argue with the guy we're quoting. I'm sure knowing Clarence, right? I know Clarence, right? We're gonna start with Judy, and then maybe we'll go to Michael Feinberg. So Judy, start us on the Shai.
Long after liberation, the lingering effects of dehumanization endure. One of the many things Pharaoh had taken from them is their ability to trust. God's provision of manna and Shabbat is intended to restore that ability, and thus to open them to the possibility of healthy dependence and real relationship. A few weeks after liberation, everyone is discontented. The Israelites angrily declared, if only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. The people insist, in essence, that God is about to kill them in the wilderness, so he might as well have done the job back in Egypt, or at least they would have died on a full stomach. A midrash suggests, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread, it does not say when we ate from the flesh pots, for we sat by them as the Egyptians ate and only had bread to eat. When the people skewed recollection, Torah demonstrates just how profoundly fear and anxiety can warp out our perceptions. The people had been exploited and degraded for generations. But now only a few weeks' distance from Egypt has given a rosy hue to their experience in the slave house.
One more paragraph.
God responds by providing the mysterious bread from the sky. The manna appears each day steadily sustaining the people through their long years of desert wandering. But it comes with built-in controls. First, whether one gathers a little or a lot, one ends up with only what one needs to eat. And second, the manna must be eaten on the day it is collected. Storing and hoarding are impermissible.
Right, so, getting out of that slave mentality, Michael.
As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that God is not only feeding the Israelites, but also educating them. Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra maintains that God is testing Israel's ability to tolerate needing God every day. Dependence can be difficult. God wants to teach trust, a genuine trust that will require the embrace of healthy dependence. I think that's a very questionable idea, healthy dependence. Anyway, the real test, Walter Briggerman argues, is whether Israel can receive bread under wholly new terms. The people are being taught a new way of being, a new way of receiving. The test doesn't go well. The people pay no attention to Moses and try to store manna overnight, but it becomes infested with worms. Israel's resistance proves stronger than God's command. Trusting God is evidently too frightening. Given their prolonged persecution in Egypt, it is no surprise that the people resist dependence on God of any kind. But God is not Pharaoh, and gracious gifts should not be conflated with the meager rations supplied by a ruthless despot. The stark contrast between God and Pharaoh is amplified by the envelope structure of chapter 16 as a whole. While the chapter begins with Israel's distorted and debilitating memory of past provisions in Egypt, it ends with an attempt to instill a very different kind of memory in the people. Aaron is to put an omer of manna in a jar and place the jar before the ark to be kept throughout the ages, in order that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out from the land of Egypt. Terence Fretheim explains the idealized and unwarranted memories of Pharaoh's food are to be replaced with the genuine memories of the bread from God. This is in many ways the key to the story. The people are to be fed not by a cruel taskmaster, but by a loving provider.
Okay, maybe, as Michael inserts doubt into us, which is important. Tom, pick it up right now, on the surface.
On the surface, there is something odd about the instructions given to Aaron to set the manna in the ark that has not been built yet. But something deeper is going on. The ark will contain the Ten Commandments, which encapsulate Israel's obligations to God. But crucially, the ark contains something else as well. Before it receives the tablet, it receives a jar. Scripture first tells us about a God of manna before it tells us about a God of mandates. A God who graciously provides before a God who lays down the law. We need God and we need other people because we are human and therefore fragile. The question ultimately is not whether we will be dependent, but on whom. The Torah is, in part, a story about leaving destructive dependency and discovering life-affirming dependency as a radical alternative. We should not make an idol of dependency. There is a dignity that comes from being able to care and provide for oneself. And yet, dependency is an irreducible part of the human condition.
Finish it up. No, finish it up. Yeah, we got something, Carol.
Jewish theology takes a radical step. It tells us that not only are we dependent on God, but also that on some level, God chooses to be dependent on us. The deeper we dig, the more a theology of human dependence on God reveals itself to be a divine human interdependence or covenant. There is a courage and dignity in learning to say, I need you. Remarkably, Jewish theology teaches, even God decides to say those fateful, liberating words.
Right, of course, I love the ending, right? Because, Shai Held is implying this is a covenantal interdependence, as Carol implied in her comment. right? Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I question this healthy dependence. I understand necessary dependence, which is, for instance, the dependence of a child for its parents, but healthy, there seems to me we're conflating a dependence on faith and a dependence on God. I think they need to be distinguished, and I think that, and I don't think health comes into it.
Okay, all right. There is something, however, here, or to be, discerned, especially in this formative year or years of the wilderness wandering, that faith, right, and a healthy dependence may go hand in hand, right? Maybe healthy dependence goes a long way to faith, right? Virginia, I know you're in the same place somehow, but go ahead.
No, on another floor. Anyway, no, I totally disagree with Michael, but I can't go downstairs to tell him so. I think that in every healthy relationship, there's healthy dependency. That's the whole thing. And it's something that is in psychology. You can have pathological dependency, but healthy dependency helps you live. So that's I don't want to run downstairs. Okay. Now, what I want to say, what I wanted to say is that what God is developing here is healthy dependency. Is developing to traumatize people. For 400 years, they've been forgotten by God, and God has to restore confidence, and it takes time. And like anybody who's traumatized will need that kind of help.
Yeah,
So
this is the renewal of a relationship that God has to go a long way to establish. A long way. And notice Virginia is on the upper floor.
Literally, and I don't know, whatever. But no, that's what no, that's what I really think. It's and when you have to restore confidence, you can't do it giving them a lot all of a sudden. You have to give every day what is needed.
Beautiful, beautiful, right? So Simon, quick comment, then we're going to go to the other draft text.
The other piece with this that hits me is the fact that everybody had to go and get their portion.
Yeah.
Which means the children and every single person in the family unit has to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
Which changes the structure of a tradition.
Yeah. Which also is a covenantal requirement. In order to make this relationship real, you got to do something. You've got to go out there. You've got it, right? So I want to read Clarence because it's so well done and thoughtful and articulate and academic. Start us, Clarence. Maybe Josh Hasten, if you want to read a little bit after we do Carol at the beginning. We're not going to do the whole thing, by the way. Go ahead.
God informs Moses that each morning the Israelites are to gather manna for the day's portion. But on the sixth day, when they apportion what they have brought in, it shall prove to be double the amount they gather each day, because none would appear on the seventh, a day of rest, a holy Sabbath of Adonai. That extra portion the Israelites were promised would not spoil. Interestingly, God gives the Israelites Shabbat and links this day of rest to a particular food, manna, which is apparently something new in the world.
Right, so Clarence is now going to make the understanding of why manna is unique, even over and above Shabbat. Go ahead, Karen.
God gave this beneficial food directly to the Israelites without any intermediary. The text's clear language describes manna and distinguishes a day of rest without allegory or metaphor. Unlike miracles the Israelites had witnessed, but which were geared to the direct detriment of others, manna and Shabbat were specifically received by the Israelites for their tangible benefit. And unlike miracles the Israelites witnessed for their direct benefit, these did not occur once, but repeatedly with a regular cadence. And unlike miracles in which they bore witness, in these the Israelites actively participate. Furthermore, unlike the Passover miracle, the miracles of manna and Shabbat were inclusive. Manna was not restricted to those who were circumcised, nor was Shabbat. The whole Israelite community should partake of manna every day and on the day of rest.
Yeah, the next paragraph says it is a multi-sensory thing, just like Shabbat. And the goal was that you will know I, Adonai, am your God. It's about relationship, right? right? And that manna, of course, is for every day of the week. The next paragraph is worthwhile. Importantly, manna was not only for Shabbat. Carol, that one. Then we're going to switch to John.
Okay, and also for every day of the week. This 7-day cadence with Shabbat, the pinnacle, and punctuation established a common calendar, which thus shaped personal and community-wide expectations. The whole Israelite community experienced and observed this central informative institution prior to the revelation at Mount Sinai. God's first utterances at Mount Sinai, in effect, simply codified and mirrored what the Israelite community already believed and practiced because of manna and Shabbat.
This is a brilliant statement, by the way. It's a really smart statement. The foundation stones of covenantal faith were Shabbat and manna, right? Josh, can you read a little bit? Remarkably?
Remarkably, God let manna fall and gave the Israelites Shabbat, both without condition, despite Israelites falling short, repeated testaments to God's constancy and patience toward the Israelites. Manna fell and Shabbat occurred despite Israelites grumbling against Moses for lack of water at Massa and Meribah. Manna fell and Shabbat occurred despite some Israelites building and worshiping a golden calf, putting their trust and hopes in an inanimate object. God continued, without fail, to gift to the Israelite community both manna and Shabbat when Moses came down and in anger smashed the first set of tablets. During the terrible punishments exacted after Moses went up again with 2 tablets, and when he came down with the new testimony.
Right, so this, for instance, says, we know that, so skip a paragraph, Josh, and go ironically.
Ironically, the full significance of the jar of manna, placed in front of the tablets in the Holy Ark, and counted among the most sacred of artifacts, to be remembered for all time, is all but forgotten. Today, the 2 chalot on each Shabbat are the only breadcrumbs that remind us of the 2 omers of manna, a tradition which first appeared in the Babylonian Talmud of reciting the chamotzi blessing over 2 chalot loaves on Shabbat. Shabbat has its fixed, inextricable place each week, which is wonderful. But reacquainting ourselves with the jointly linked great miracle of manna reminds us of the 40-year period of dispensation of a sort that it and God gave the Israelites. Manna afforded the whole Israelite community the time to firmly establish Shabbat and God's teachings, and thereby a society different from that of Egypt, based on the values and faith inherent in the day of rest and in how to manage manna. Given manna's central significance in forming, strengthening, and ensuring the longevity of this community and its testament to God's constancy, it would make sense to reinstitute a daily remembrance of that great miracle. While some Jews already acknowledge its centrality, perhaps all who observe should acknowledge God for sustaining us with manna when reciting the blessing over bread. For example, one may add, sustained us with manna to the blessing such that in English it would read, blessed is the oneness that makes us holy, sustained us with manna, and brings forth bread from the earth.
Yeah, I thought it was, we actually, Clarence submitted to Ritual Well, which is a ritual blog done by 2 Reform rabbis, one of whom is going to be here actually tomorrow, who started Ritual Well. But why is it so interesting? Manna it's all but gone from the picture. You say manna, people say, yeah, manna from heaven. They don't say, oh yeah, manna like we bless every time we make a motzi. Oh no. Manna is all but forgotten, and that's a shame.
You can answer this question. So they had these movies, the Ark of the Covenant, the sound for the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes.
They don't think about the jar.
Yeah, you know what?
The jar would be great.
The jar would be great. And by the way, Josh is sort of, in a connected business. So Josh, jar of manna, right? Right, Raiders of the Lost Jar. Raiders of the Lost Jar. Come on. I see, by the way, no joy on Josh's face. He's not saying, of course, yeah, right. So the manna is supposed to bring us to a new level of awareness. On a sod level, even deeper, right? I'm going to call on Ellis and then Steve.
So, I mean, it seems rather self-evident that the lesson is not to rely on or to trust God, but to rely on and trust each other.
Yeah, but you know, first of all, so well said, so simple, but so hard to do, right? And what's the goal? How are you gonna become a people Israel when you are a mixed multitude? By learning to trust each other, by not taking more than is yours, by not taking from somebody else, by sharing in this ritual of going out every morning and gathering the day's need, by knowing your sustenance and your nourishment are the same as mine. Very powerful, Ellis. Yeah, Steve.
So at this point, every week I walk away and I go, well, like, how does this work for me during the week? Or how does this work going forward?
First of all, you're sitting way too close to Arnie, so I want you to move further away now.
He loves off.
Arnie knows I love him, so I think, go ahead.
So the question becomes, like, how does this work in today's world? You know, when you sit down to a Shabbat meal or when you sit down to a.
Yes,
How do you make it work?
I'm gonna pay Steve after Shabbos. So look at this road. The Sfas Emes, the Gera Rebbe, Abraham of Ger says, here's the main idea. Devar Yom V'Yomo. Each day, that day's portion. The Holy One performs the miracle of renewal every day. And the test is to see if we can see it. Just as one must learn to raise nature from its source, so God's Torah awaits our discovery. The manna is there each morning, ready to be gathered in again. But can we see it? See in it the insights of this day that will sustain us.
Get gesund.
What is the Ger Rebbe saying? Manna is there every morning, awaiting our ingathering. A day's portion that is more than enough, right? Will we recognize God's sustenance? We know it's there. Can we see it? Right? The spiritual gifts for our consumption are ready for the taking. And what do? Kvetch. I really wish I had a house in Malibu. Really? That's what you're saying? That's what you're doing? Right? So we can embrace, right, that flaky, ambiguous dew of a new day, intentionally ambiguous. You're not supposed to be able to hold it. But if you shape it, it can taste like anything. Oh, come on.
To me, at least it creates this interesting image. I mean, we're in this complex society where all the stuff that we are gonna use today has been created by other people we don't see or know, but you know, my food's coming from farmers and truckers and et cetera, and you know, the clothes I wear, et cetera. To say, you know, thank you everybody else in this society for what I have.
Yeah, so underscoring Ellis's point, right? What we have has not, where does it really come from? Everyone. This is a cooperative effort that sustains each soul, each person.
You know, your last comment, the Sefer Emes, the way you shaped it is easy to buy.
Yeah,
It fits right in because it puts the power in you.
Yes.
In terms of, do I want to embrace this? Do I want to see what I have in front of me? Do I want to be grateful for what I have? Or do I want to kvetch all the time?
Yes,
So
yes.
It's a beautiful comment.
Yes,
You hit a home run.
by Josh, by the way, I love what Josh is saying. So Ellis says, rely not on God, but on each other by placing the Israelites in action around each other to be a participant in not only their lives, but in the lives of those around them. That is what it means to be a sacred community. Maybe that's what it means to know God. But then Josh chimes in because we are basically Talmudic rabbis around the table. But can you eat metaphors? So it functions on a dual level. Yes, you should be thankful for the clothes you wear, right? Famous words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who says, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. He says that by talking about a trip to India he took with his wife and seeing the nature of the people there, how poor they were, and yet how they trusted, right? And so we're supposed to, that's the goal. So the goal is every day has enough if we'll only see it. John, last comment.
Well, it seems to me it's very Jewish because we're talking about food.
Okay. Yeah, but yes, it's very Jewish because we're talking about food.
Law. Particularly from your grandmother, food.
Yeah.
And this, I hadn't realized, this is really not a story about food. This is a story about love.
Beautiful. Yeah. I found my my eulogy for my bubby. You know, I grew up in a two-family house. I lived down upstairs. My bubby and Solly lived downstairs, and I ate every day almost at my bubby's house. And the eulogy, and I don't title eulogies, but I titled my bubby's eulogy. It's called In Bubby's Kitchen, and I talk about how she gave love through food.
Yes.
And my bubby didn't say a lot of things, right? But she would say S. That was it. That's all she had to say. Maybe God is saying S. And in the way manna is given and the way manna is so ambiguous, it's up to us, right? Not only to hold on to it, but to realize not only do we have enough for ourselves, we may have enough for the guy next to us. You've wasted a perfectly good day doing manna. Thank you to Clarence. I wish you could be here. And thank you to everybody. Have a lot. Come tomorrow. It's gonna be great. Tomorrow's gonna be great. If you're available tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, brother, at breakfast, it's gonna be awesome. Yeah.
Bye, Mike.
See you guys. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Mike. and
Rabbi,
Tanya.
tomorrow,
Thanks,
one question. Tomorrow, is it going to be Zoomed, the Brotherhood?
Yes, tomorrow will be. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It'll be Zoomed? Great.
Yeah,
Good.
great. They are great people. They're great people. Okay.
Where's the link?
It's gonna be in the Gordon room, but we have a setup. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to send a link. Somebody has to send a link.
We got it.